Hello and welcome to. Wait, sorry, am I starting? Or are you starting?
You can start.
Okay. Um, Hello and welcome to Dial-Up Dessert, a show about media, art, and nostalgia. Today, we would like to discuss and briefly analyze the 1993 anime film Ninja Scroll.
Yep. Um, let's see here. So, before we jump right into the movie, very good movie as it is, I want to briefly go over the entire like industry up to this point. It's mostly OVAs and what most people would consider to be classic anime. So, for a quick rundown for those uninitiated, OVAs are simply just means original video animation. And while that's extremely a broad term, it mostly refers to direct to video anime, and they were most prominent throughout the 80s and 90s. They were typically VHS tapes and later DVDs that you would either buy or rent from a video store. They ranged from everything between standard movie length films to multi episode shows. In their prime, they were an unfathomable number of these being released to the public, and it was around this time that anime started being introduced to Western audiences, and likely paved the way for movies such as Akira and Ghost in the Shell having theatrical releases in these audiences. It's well known that OVAs like Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Gundam, Devilman came out during this period. Uh,
It is also important to note that while Western audiences were familiar with the concept of anime at this point, they were understandably very niche. They were not the kinds of things that would be displayed in theaters. Even through the late 80s, you might have a Studio Ghibli, in conjunction with Disney release. But other than that, there was basically nothing.
Yes, absolutely. They were still extremely niche. They only came out in select theaters, and still even then, not many people knew about them. Ninja Scroll is not actually an OVA, but this info is still heavily relevant because it highlights the media environment surrounding the release of the movie, and we will also undoubtedly be going over more anime in a similar vein to this, as many of them became pieces of obscure media due to the fact that they were not preserved well throughout the transition from VHS to DVD.
And
And
released in a time before the internet, before there were data hoarders ready to preserve these.
yes, that's very true. Also, many of these companies that distributed these OVAs went under over the years, leaving their products to be cast into legal limbo of distribution. So,
Um, Now, Ninja Scroll, for those of you unfamiliar with it entirely, is in many ways the precursor to a lot of uh, fantasy and uh, period anime that would come later. Things nebulously set in Japan, right? Very influenced by medieval Japanese history and culture and mythology, most importantly. Um, this one in particular, you see a lot of inspiration that would come in later and far less adult ways. You would see it come up later in things like Bleach and Naruto, especially. It was a piece animated by Madhouse, that famous animation studio that made so much good stuff all throughout the 90s and 2000s. Um, they would also make things like Trigun, Death Note, and One Punch Man. The first season, not the bad season. Um, it was well received at the time, which is unfortunate because I would like to talk about really bad media in this show quite often, but I suppose we'll get to those over time.
oh, there's so many of them.
Now it's understood to be a classic, right? It's the classic anime released in 1995, right at the time when internet speeds were uh, getting fast enough that you could reasonably discuss this stuff with other people online without waiting 2.5 years to connect to whatever primitive proto net there was.
Yep. So, before we dive into this even further, I want to briefly go over my very initial thoughts while viewing this, and this is definitely a make or break for a lot of people. I feel like, but this movie is extremely hyper violent, like to such an absurd degree. Very early into the film, there's like guys being like chopped in half from like oversized like kunai, which are the like ninja daggers, basically.
Yeah, the little digging implement turned into the assassin's weapon.
Yeah, exactly. And it's definitely a height for it's one of its main appeals is just the huge and extreme amounts of depiction of blood and gore.
Which also was not uncommon in the late 1980s and early 1990s,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
especially in anime films like this.
Yeah.
Um, but during this time, it was often not cute little anime girls getting disemboweled, but just, fighting men getting disemboweled, I guess.
Yeah, anime distinctly had a much more realistic style. But you're also right, like in like the 80s and 90s, hyperviolence was like everywhere, man. Down to like stuff like the Terminator, like Commando and whatnot, as an American equivalent. Uh, but yeah, so a little bit of forewarning if you want to watch it. I highly recommend it. But there you go.
And violence, I think, is par for the course for this kind of media. It's just that it's being rendered in, it's animated. It's not a live action film where you might expect such death on screen. So I guess they do take some creative liberty with the showers of gore and all that, with
Mm-hmm.
the dismembered bodies and everything. Uh, what I do particularly like though is the very clear inspiration from the tacky, low budget ninja and samurai movies from the 1970s and
Yeah,
80s, I suppose,
earlier.
too. Yeah, the hundreds of these terrible films that were just, being released ad nauseum, down to like the specific sound effects for what it sounds like when a man adjusts his sword when he's holding it at his side. The sound that a wire makes as it flies at you from behind a tree or something.
Mm-hmm.
All these really particular sound effects that to some extent have been preserved. Um, the sounds of the characters running, for example, is indistinguishable to one you might hear in like a modern episode of like Naruto or Boruto, I guess, is the currently running one. That's the currently running series. So with that, then that or Boruto's dad, I suppose, have the have a lot of the same sound effects. The whooshing sounds as projectiles fly by, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it definitely wears its inspirations on its sleeve from the early 80s, 70s samurai flicks, even down to like the like 20s, 30s, and whatnot, since those movies have been going for a long time. But let's jump into the story, shall we?
Let us.
Okay. So the writing is very standard and similar to anime films that were released around the same time. It's your standard like action movie romp, you know. Its main like strong points are its really well crafted action scenes and animation styles. There's your stoic hero who begins as the movie as an already skilled and developed character, and then teams up with the kind of generic like cold and stealthy like femme fatale, almost like a Bond girl, you know. Uh, and then there's like the mysterious old man slash mentor kind of guy. You're definitely not going to find any deep narratives here, but this is still an otherwise very enjoyable cast of characters that you get to see interact with each other. And I found myself invested into the two main leads and did genuinely want them to like succeed in the end. So there's that going for it.
And there will be pretty heavy spoilers, so if you do intend to watch this, you should
Yes.
watch it first.
Yeah, I will notify people when we get into spoiler talk. We probably won't dive too much into it, but just in case, spoilers for like a 30-year-old movie. But
I
yeah,
and more importantly, a 30-year-old movie whose story is basically irrelevant. It's about the hyper violence. You're here to see the cool action. Um,
exactly.
I I think what strikes me is the extent of development for these characters is pretty typical for an action movie. They
Mm-hmm.
they end the movie being kind of the same sort of people, but with like, oh, maybe I should be nice to people. I'm gonna keep being a mercenary, however. That kind of I mean, the old man doesn't even really change at all, right? He's just a government operative.
Mm-hmm. It's almost
Um,
kind of like one of those like really long running like shonen anime where the character ends the same way as it started out because it has to be consistent with all the other like episodes, chapters, what have you.
yeah, I think what made me feel almost like this wanted to be an episodic piece was a villain would be introduced, a fight would ensue, and it was, they would introduce some interesting magic powers that the opponent has, and then the opponent would be defeated within the course of 5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, this is very like show like, and we will dive further into that because I have some very interesting tidbits that not many people know about. I feel, but yeah, it definitely has those elements to it.
Um, well, I guess I shouldn't be overly critical because having a lot of villains means that either the character is going to have to interact with them a whole bunch and then fight them all at the end, and this isn't the Avengers, and we're not going to have a gigantic CGI fight. So I do appreciate the focus on just one-on-one combat
Mm-hmm.
throughout most of it, and I particularly appreciate the kind of interesting combinations of like here is a cool supernatural power and here's like a mythical kind of thing from Japanese folklore. And characters usually have a little bit of both. Some I'm probably not even getting the reference to it because I'm not Japanese, nor do I know anything about Japanese like history or anything. Uh, but the woman who can stitch back together corpses to make bombs, like that's a really cool power and something that I would expect in a modern episodic anime as a villain character.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I will say, just like Chris here, a lot of the cultural influences and mythology is lost on me, but I can still appreciate a lot of it because that is a really cool ability that I haven't really seen elsewhere. You know?
Yeah, and things like the one shadow ninja who can launch the little mechanized claw with the chain
Yeah.
and also can mind control people. It is quite entertaining how they'll just demonstrate a new power. There's no need to explain it, right? It's just magic.
Yeah.
A couple times in the film, a character makes reference to his opponent's technique being interesting or impressive, and that's all it is. It's a jutsu. It's just a technique. That's the extent of these magic powers for the ninja.
Yeah. They're mainly just gimmicks for that, make up the core of each main enemy.
So, all right, okay. Spoiler talk.
Oh,
Um,
we jumping into that?
well, I think we should.
All right.
Might as well.
Yeah.
We're going to briefly talk about the plot itself. If you're not like any spoilers, then you can skip to, I don't know, I'm going to put in a timestamp or something. Um, can we do that? Wait, do they still have timestamps?
I think we can put them in like the comments down below.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can put it in the description. Do that.
Oh, you could also do that. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to talk about spoilers. There'll be a timestamp in the description, and it'll say, when Chris starts rambling, click on this, because you're not going to be missing anything important. I'm going to continue rambling for a couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And now that all the weenies are gone, and we're going to talk about spoilers, let's talk about spoilers.
Now that no one left.
Yeah, now that 5 of the 10 viewers have skipped, um, let's let's spoil some things. Garrett, you wanna walk through it real quick?
Okay.
Not just
So
the end, but briefly, like the events of the film, really fast.
the events of the film really fast. Uh, okay, so it's Jubei's the main character. He's the mercenary guy. He hooks up with Kagero, I believe. Kagero. That
Kagero, yeah, she's
yeah.
the.
I actually like her character a lot, even though she like has a lot of like the generic like you know
She's like
female
literally the
partner.
Tsundere character.
Yeah, that like gets really tropey later on. Like she's still interesting. Her whole thing is that she's kind of like Rogue from X-Men, where she can't like have contact with other people because like her skin and like body is all poison. But like the plus side of that is that she's resistant to all poison. And that's how she got involved with her ninja clan. Is she's like I think she starts out as like a poison taster, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then her clan gets decimated by these absolute behemoths that just have unexplained powers, and
The big chungus of the demon ninjas, a large man made out of stone who hurls a giant two-sided kunai.
yeah, he just obliterates everyone and just kind of eats them for some reason. And I don't understand that. But he captures her, and then Jubei is around to rescue her, and they like unite. They pair up, and that's kind of what kicks off the plot. They later meet like this old guy who ends up poisoning Jubei, and he's like, "Hey, you gotta kill all 7 of these guys. I think it's 7 of them. You gotta kill all 7 of these guys, or I won't give you the antidote to this poison." So Jubei's like, "All right." Oh well. So he embarks on his grand quest to kill the remaining ninja.
Yeah, the devils of Kimon,
Yes.
brought back from the afterlife by uh, Genma, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The
And
evil ninja whose jutsu is that he just doesn't die.
yeah, okay. So Genma is an important character because he is directly related to Jubei, which I think is a pretty nice touch that they didn't really need to jump into. Like they could have just made him a regular rando guy. But what was his name? Kinmon? Wait.
Well, the devils of Kimon are the villain group, but Genma is
Okay,
the
right,
primary
right.
antagonist.
Right. Okay. So Genma is like the leader of the Devils of Kimon, and he once was a part of the same clan as Jubei, but I think he betrayed there was like some sort of like discourse in the clan, and Jubei got out, and Genma, tried and hunt him down and kill him. Jubei ended up cutting off his head, and that was the end of that. But for some reason, I think like his will was just really strong that allowed him to reattach his head and come back as an evil guy.
Yeah, when you're pissed off enough, you sew your head back onto your body, and you just don't die.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he did. He just didn't die, and he got together this band of weirdos, and they just started plowing through other clans to achieve gold, power, and whatnot. They start working with like other clans, some crazy convoluted stuff. But yeah, it ends up with them. What are they doing? They take like an entire ship full of gold and try and like make off with it in the end. And by then, all the guys are dead pretty much. All like 6 of them, except for Genma, is still alive. And it just comes down to Jubei. Kagero dies after she gets like stabbed by one of the devils of Kemon, and Jubei is like, "Oh, uh, this is this is bad," It's like, "Oh, my love interest." So he's on
Yeah,
his revenge quest now, and it's all like emotionally charged and heated. And they have their awesome boat duel and start a
yeah,
fire.
aboard a flaming ship filled with mountains of gold that begin to melt.
Yeah, for some reason the gold melts. I'm not sure. Just regular ass fire can do that. I don't know. Have to have a
Yeah, can
scientist
boat
look into
fires melt gold bars?
it. That's a real question to be asking,
That's a
folks.
very oblique reference to a bad conspiracy theory.
Oh yes.
Um, I think if we're gonna talk about spoilers, and especially near the end, gotta say, my favorite death, and unfortunate because he was, I think, my favorite ninja in the film,
Oh.
Yorimaru, the electricity ninja who can throw the wires around people's necks.
Oh yeah, he was pretty interesting. I liked him.
Sets up a trap, captures Juve, and starts, electrocuting him. And a rat wanders into the room, and Yorimaru looks at it like inquisitively. And then the rat flips over and reveals the stitching on its stomach that Zakura puts on, her living bombs when she deploys them. And then the next shot is on the docks, and a building explodes, in town, and a severed arm lands next to Zakuro. and it's very clearly Yorimaru as she picks it up and scoffs and like, "Oh, Yorimaru, look what you've become," and throws his arm into the water.
Yeah, it's very petty stuff like that. I will say that all the main like bad guys have very interesting web of relationships. You can easily tell that there's like some romances going on. There's people trying to pursue other ones. There's other guys that have like deep rivalries with one another, and they're like
Which is
meticulously.
weird for characters that are introduced and then killed almost immediately.
Yeah, it is weird, but like it adds like an interesting like layer of depth that didn't like need to be there, but it's still fun nonetheless.
The blind samurai was
Oh
quite
yeah,
cool.
he was very
Although
interesting.
probably the most boring. I didn't even realize that he was a character. He shows up, says he would like to duel, and then is killed.
I liked the fight scene. I like the setting. The character is vaguely interesting, but he doesn't like. He's the only one that doesn't have any like crazy supernatural power. He's just like a really skilled bladesman who just happens to be blind and uses like his ears to his advantage. I thought that was an alright fight. It didn't last very long though, and he just kind of like dies because Kagero jumps in and just, stabs him.
Yeah, no, I mean the stone guy had what felt like the most, I don't know, intensely supernatural ability. The electricity thing was cool, but other than that, Yorimaru was just a ninja who's good at choking people with a wire.
I think the stone guy was probably one of the better fights. They have it in the beginning. They build him up probably the
Yeah, and
most. I
he
want to
beat the
say.
snot out of Juve in the beginning.
Yeah.
He's just, wailing on him. He only dies because he. Oh yeah, okay. Fair warning. There's two straight up rape scenes in this movie.
Oh yeah, it's
Uh,
really not fun.
why am I blanking on the stone guy's name? Tessai. Tessai is his name.
Tessai.
He's just glomming all over Kagero and like sucking on various bits. And since she's saturated with poison, he later starts succumbing to it. And that's literally the only reason that Shuffei's able to kill him is that he like disintegrates.
Yeah, that was a fun way to reveal that whole aspect of her character, though.
Yeah, and then by the end, once we've kind of become acquainted with that, that ends up being the solution, right? The antidote is the poison.
Yeah, that's
That
how Jubei gets cured of his poison, is that he
he
kisses
has to
Kagero at the
slaughter all
end.
over the girl. Yeah,
Um,
but it's consensual at that point, so it's not icky.
Not
Well,
icky,
it's
confirmed.
a little icky.
You want to move on to the animation?
Sure.
Okay. Um, I do art stuff, but I'm not an actual animator. But I will say that the movie's color scheme is so blatantly dark. There's a few daylight scenes, but it's mostly just cool colors and some saturated browns. I want to say throughout most of it. Um, I've really enjoyed the art direction, and it's very nice and atmospheric, and definitely does a good job of conveying like multitudes of moods throughout each individual scene. Uh,
There was a particular scene in maybe the final third of the movie,
mm-hmm.
um, where Jubei is fighting the Shadow Ninja with the mechanical claw
Mm-hmm.
weapon that he fires, um, and it's in what looks like a burnt out town or something. But the sky is just this like apocalyptic orange red. I mean, it's supposed to
Yeah.
be like late afternoon, but they gave everything this really severe palette,
Yeah,
so
it's
it's
so
bright
overbearing.
orange, and the structure itself, like the building that they fight in, is this dilapidated building, and everything's just black.
Yeah.
Um, and Jubei appears just as a shadow dropping into the building, and that scene was absolutely 10 out of 10. I think one of the most genuinely beautiful shots in the whole film.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Otherwise, the art is pretty strong, but there are lots of like weird, awkward, but probably intentionally stylized things in it. Mostly just um, the female characters in particular are extremely tall and skinny.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I mean, Kagero just looks like a man from behind when they show her. She has very like broad shoulders and kind of narrow hips.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a few weird little things, like the blind ninja. Dude's got shoulders that are like 6 times the width of his head. They're
There's some
ridiculous.
very powerful shoulders in this movie.
Yeah, if you're coming here for like big shoulders, you come to the right place.
Yep.
Um, Not much else to say about the animation. It's high quality and it's typical style for the time, I think. Big chins, tiny little mouths,
Yep.
especially when shown in profile. If you've seen Evangelion, it's that same kind of style.
Yeah, the animation. This was like early '90s. I'm pretty sure. So the animated style was very like mostly realistic, but still you could see like it's Asian influences, the narrow chins and all of that. That would become like way more exaggerated in the following years, of course. But some brief thoughts on the soundtrack. I thought it was really good. Nothing like really outstanding or too memorable. There's a few tracks that I'd easily go back to listen to again. But it does a good job complementing the animation and dialogue, I feel like.
The soundtrack it's just atmosphere. It's like the new Star Wars movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is epic music playing. No, you will not remember it. Um, or I guess a better analogy is the Avengers movies, right? The music is fitting, but otherwise, it's never gonna. You're not gonna remember it, right?
It
You're gonna forget it the instant you're done watching the movie.
it does its job, acting as a part of a whole.
Yeah, I think the real high quality thing here is pretty good voice acting, but extremely good sound effects. Very very satisfying clinks and metallic like crashing. And man, they love themselves some sampling for punches. There were so many different sounds for dudes getting punched in this movie.
Oh, really quick warning. I watched the subbed version. I cannot speak on how the dub is. I don't know if it's exceptionally good, bad, what have you. Just be forewarned. I watched the sub. I prefer it that way. Uh, did you watch the sub,
I
Chris?
never watch a dub if I can help it, so I don't know either.
It might be okay. Who
Mostly
knows?
because when you hear dubbing, it's like the same four voice actors that have been working in the United States for the past like 50 fucking years for some reason.
Yeah, that is kind of weird, isn't it? I wonder how that works.
Doesn't Ash Ketchum's voice actress play Naruto? I don't know. There's like weird overlap. Sorry, that's another aside. We'll get to that another time.
Yeah, that is a very interesting discussion for another time. We're almost done here. I want to give like some quick thoughts on Ninja Scroll, the animated series, which I'm almost positive no one else actually knows about. I've never heard anyone mention this before, even like when we're watching like reviews and whatnot. Uh, I just found out about this when I was like looking up the wiki to make sure I got like my facts right for writing the notes. So they made an animated series, your standard anime. I think it's like 13 episodes, and it's made by the same. It's made by Madhouse, and I watched like bits of it. The art style is drastically different. It's definitely not how it is in the movie.
Well, it was made 10 years later, and I think the reason that neither of us have heard anything about it is because this was made in 2003, which at this point was almost 20 years ago,
Yeah.
which is scary. Uh, but that would explain why there's no talk about it. There's no new film or series coming out, so it's just, kind of quietly faded away.
It seems very disconnected from the movie. Of course, like only Jubei makes it out in the end. Everyone else is dead, so I'm not sure what interesting narratives you can make out of
Except
that.
for the old man. The old man is still alive.
Oh yeah, I guess he's alive too.
I don't
Maybe he
think he's
pops
in.
up.
I don't think he's in the anime series though.
Yeah, I didn't watch too much into it. Maybe that's an episode for another time. But interesting little factoid. Uh, but yeah. So on to the wrap up. I really enjoyed the movie, and I'd easily recommend it to anyone who is interested in like older movies, older animes from that time period. If you're a fan of animation, I imagine you can easily fall in love with many of the intricately designed scenes. And I would say that a hard barrier is its sheer brutality and moments regarding sensitive subject matter.
I I would recommend it if only because I'm utterly tasteless, and if I can just sit and watch a thing, I probably will. Uh, it's old, it's dated. Like it's not nearly as exciting as a modern like shonen anime might be,
Oh, I think
but
it's
it's
better.
extraordinarily entertaining still. Um, I don't know. 7.5 out of 10. You
My
know,
only thing is that it's just a movie. You can easily watch it. 1 hour and 30 minutes. It's not like
it's not a
da-
time commitment.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a daunting task like watching a 200 episode TV show of like Naruto and have it be like mostly filler. Like no, this movie is like pretty top quality consistently throughout most of its runtime. And it's just a fun like turn your brain off action movie that you can enjoy at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think its influence in a lot of modern anime is something really interesting to look at, and its great art direction is always pretty cool. And I feel similarly about like Evangelion and other old anime films from the 90s, which is fitting because that's what the show is about.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're obsessed with like old media and especially anime, and you really like ninja shit, or maybe you don't really like ninja shit, but you want to turn into that specific kind of weeaboo, then you should watch this movie.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good point to end it off on. Sorry for the shorter episode. We'll do longer ones at some point.
Admittedly, there is relatively little to talk about when talking about a film, especially a really short one.
Yeah, for sure.
Next time we do a retrospective on a whole genre, we'll be here talking for a while.
Yep. Thanks for keeping up with us for throughout our extended break time. I appreciate everyone who stuck around. If you have suggestions, you can leave a comment down below, or you can email us at what's the email?
It's going to be in the description.
It's
There'll
gonna
be an
be in the
email in the
description.
description where you can email suggestions or you can leave a comment. But if you call me a dickhead, I'm not going to read the comment. Well, I guess I'll already have read it. I won't respond to the comment. How about that? I won't engage with it.
If you watched the movie, let us know what you thought. If you have any other cool facts that we didn't bring up, let us know. And yeah, that's that.